The rain was so loud it swallowed my father's voice until he screamed it again, closer this time. Get out! I don't need a sick daughter. I was 15, barefoot, shaking. The door slammed behind me and the lock clicked like a verdict. I remember standing there in the storm, my school backpack soaked, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The sky cracked with thunder, and for a split second, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment my life ended, not with comfort, not with goodbye, but with rejection echoing behind a closed door. 3 hours later, I was lying in a hospital bed, blood on my clothes, machines screaming around me, my body broken after being hit by a car I never even saw coming. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. Before that night, I believed families were unbreakable. I believed parents protected their children no matter what. I believed lies always fell apart under truth. I was wrong about all of it. It started with my sister. She was 2 years older, louder, smarter in the way that mattered in our house. She knew how to cry on command. She knew how to twist a story so it sounded like concern instead of cruelty. And most importantly, she knew our parents already believed her more than me. I had been sick for weeks. Dizzy spells, collapsing in school, bruises appearing where I hadn't been hit. The doctor wanted tests, rest, answers. My sister told my parents something else. She said I was faking. She said I was dramatic. She said I was doing it for attention because I couldn't stand that she was the good daughter. That lie spread through our house like smoke, quiet at first, then suffocating. I remember sitting at the dinner table while my mother watched me like I was a stranger. My father stopped asking how school was. Conversations ended when I walked into the room. And every time I tried to explain that something was wrong with my body, really wrong, I saw it in their eyes. Annoyance, suspicion, disgust. The night it all collapsed, the storm had been building all day. The air was heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. I came home early from school after nearly fainting in the hallway. My sister was already there, sitting comfortably at the kitchen table, whispering to my parents. When I walked in, she looked at me and shook her head slowly, like I was a disappointment she had warned them about. My father didn't even ask what happened. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. His face was red, his hands shaking, not with fear, but with anger. "I'm done with this," he said. "I'm done with your lies. I'm done with your pretending." I tried to speak. I tried to say the word doctor. I tried to say tests, but he cut me off. "You are not ruining this family anymore. If you want attention, get it somewhere else." Then he grabbed my backpack and threw it at me. The zipper burst open. My notebook spilled onto the floor like evidence of a life I was about to lose. "Get out," he screamed. "I don't need a sick daughter." My mother stood behind him, silent. My sister didn't look away. The door closed, the lock turned, and just like that, I was no one's child. I walked into the storm because there was nowhere else to go. Rain soaked through my clothes in minutes. My hands went numb, my vision blurred. I remember thinking maybe if I just kept walking, someone would notice me. Maybe someone would care. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had been abandoned by the people who were supposed to love them most. Back then, though, I thought I was completely alone in the world. The road was darker than it should have been. Streetlights flickered. Cars passed too fast, spraying water onto the sidewalk. My legs felt heavy, like they didn't belong to me anymore. I don't remember stepping into the street. I remember headlights. I remember the sound of brakes. I remember flying. And then, nothing. When I woke up, the ceiling was white, too white. My chest burned every time I tried to breathe. There was a woman sitting beside my bed, holding my hand like she had been there forever. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know she was the reason my heart was still beating. And I didn't know that this moment, this hospital room, this stranger's kindness was about to split my life into two parts, before her and everything after. But as I drifted in and out of consciousness, one thought cut through the pain like a blade. If my own family could leave me to die in a storm, what would it take to survive this world alone? The first thing I learned in the hospital was that pain has layers. There was the physical pain, sharp, undeniable, measured by machines and whispered numbers, broken ribs, a fractured leg, internal bleeding that had been caught just in time. The doctor said if the car had been going any faster, I wouldn't be there at all. But beneath that was another pain, quieter and harder to treat. No one came. The nurses asked gently again and again, "Is there anyone we should call? Parents? Family?" I shook my head every time. At first because I was too weak to explain, later because the truth felt heavier than my injuries. The woman who sat with me, that stranger, was named Evelyn. She was the one who had pulled her car over in the rain, the one who had screamed for help, the one who had stayed until the ambulance came, refusing to let go of my hand, even when my blood made her sleeves red. "I couldn't leave you," she told me softly. "You were just a child." No one had called me that in a long time. Evelyn wasn't related to me. She didn't owe me anything, but she brought me clean clothes. She argued with the hospital administrator when they asked where my parents were. She filled out paperwork she had no legal right to fill out, simply writing guardian, temporary, and daring anyone to challenge her. Days passed, then a week. Still, no one came. At night, when the ward grew quiet, I stared at the door, waiting for footsteps I knew would never arrive. I imagined my mother suddenly realizing I was gone, my father driving through the storm, regret written all over his face, my sister crying, confessing the lie that destroyed me. None of it happened. Instead, a social worker sat at the foot of my bed and explained my options in a voice so careful it hurt. Temporary foster placement, emergency housing, long-term care. I was 15, listening to adults decide where to put me, like luggage no one wanted to claim. Evelyn interrupted her. "She can stay with me," she said without hesitation. The social worker looked surprised. "You're not family." Evelyn nodded. "I know. That's why I'll take better care of her." That was the moment something inside me broke open, not shattered, opened, like a door I didn't know existed. Living with Evelyn was strange at first. Her apartment smelled like coffee and books. She labeled the kitchen shelves. She knocked before entering my room. When I flinched at sudden noises, she pretended not to notice, but moved more slowly around me. She took me to specialists, real ones, the kind who listened. Within months, the truth came out. I had an autoimmune condition that explained everything: the dizziness, the bruising, the collapse. Untreated, it could have killed me. The doctor said it plainly, no drama, just facts. If she had stayed on the streets much longer, he said, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Evelyn squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. My parents never called to ask why I was sick. Not once. Recovery was slow. My body healed before my trust did. At school, I learned how to keep my head down, how to become invisible. At home, Evelyn taught me something radical: consistency. She showed up every day. When I failed a test, when I cried for no clear reason, when nightmares woke me up shaking. She never demanded gratitude. She never asked me to forgive my parents. She just gave me space to exist. Years passed. I studied harder than anyone, not because I loved school, but because education felt like the only thing no one could take away from me. Scholarships followed, then research grants, then opportunities that felt unreal to the girl who had once stood barefoot in a storm. I didn't talk about my family. When people asked, I learned to smile and change the subject. It was easier to let them assume I was alone by choice than explain I had been discarded. Evelyn was there when I graduated high school, college, graduate school. Each ceremony she clapped like it was the most important day of her life, and every time there was an empty space in the crowd where my parents could have been. 13 years after the night that nearly killed me, I stood in front of a mirror, adjusting a keynote speaker badge pinned to my jacket. Founder, researcher, advocate, survivor. I had built something meaningful out of the wreckage. The Second Chances Scholarship Program was my proudest achievement, helping students who had been abandoned, overlooked, or pushed aside the way I had been, giving them what I never had, someone who believed them. When the university invited me to speak at their graduation, I thought it was just another milestone, another room of strangers. I had no idea who would be sitting in the audience. As I waited backstage, the announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "Please welcome our keynote speaker." I took a breath, stepped into the light, and in the third row, I saw them, my parents. Older, grayer, but unmistakable. Beside them, my sister, wearing a graduation gown. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I realized the past hadn't finished with me yet. For a moment, my body forgot how to move. The applause faded into a dull roar, like I was underwater. My notes were suddenly heavy in my hands. 13 years of distance collapsed into a single, suffocating second. My parents sat side by side. My father's posture was rigid, hands folded tightly in his lap. My mother's eyes were wide, fixed on me as if she were seeing a ghost. And my sister looked like she might disappear into her seat. None of them smiled. They hadn't known. That much was clear. The woman they had thrown out into a storm was standing on a stage, introduced as a leader, a founder, someone worth listening to. The contrast was too sharp to ignore. I turned away before they could read my face. The microphone was warm when I wrapped my fingers around it. The lights were blinding, but I welcomed that. It made it easier to pretend I couldn't see anyone, easier to forget the past staring back at me from the audience. "I want to talk today," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, "about resilience." A familiar word. Safe. Applause followed. I waited for it to die down. "And about a 15-year-old, I continued, who learned much earlier than she should have what it means to be alone." The room went quiet. I didn't look at them, but I felt them. I felt my mother lean forward. I felt my father stiffen. I felt my sister's attention snap into focus like a held breath. "She was sick," I said. "Not the kind of sick people could see easily, the kind that makes others uncomfortable, the kind that gets dismissed." My hands trembled. I pressed them against the podium to steady myself. "One night, during a storm, she was told to leave her home. No plan, no money, no one to call." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I swallowed. "She didn't leave because she wanted freedom," I said quietly. "She left because staying meant disappearing anyway." I paused, just long enough for the weight of that sentence to settle. "That night, she was hit by a car." Gasps, real ones, the kind that come from the chest. I saw it then, out of the corner of my eye, my mother's hand flying to her mouth, my father's face draining of color, my sister staring straight ahead, frozen. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head. I thought it would feel like revenge, like power. It didn't. It felt like truth, finally breathing. She survived, I continued, not because her family came looking for her. They didn't. She survived because a stranger stopped. I told them about Evelyn. I didn't say her name yet. I talked about a woman who pulled over in the rain, who held a bleeding teenager's hand, who stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. That stranger became her family, not by blood, by choice. The room was completely silent now. You could hear someone shift in their seat. I could feel the eyes on me, not just my parents, but hundreds of others, students, professors, families, people who had never questioned what home meant. For years, I said, that girl believed being abandoned meant she wasn't worth keeping. My throat tightened. I let it. This wasn't a performance. This was a reckoning. She believed if the people who made her couldn't love her, no one ever truly would. I paused again, this time longer. But she was wrong. I lifted my gaze, finally letting it sweep across the audience. Faces blurred together, except three. My father was staring at the floor. My mother was crying openly now, shoulders shaking. My sister looked like she was struggling to breathe. The girl in this story grew up, I said. She studied harder than anyone because knowledge couldn't be taken away. She built a life not out of revenge, but out of refusal to disappear. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing. And one day, I continued, she created a scholarship program for students who had been abandoned, dismissed, or told they didn't matter. I let that sink in. Second chances, I said, because everyone deserves one, even if they never received a first. The applause was thunderous now. I should have stopped there. I could have ended on inspiration, on hope, on something clean and uncomplicated. But there was something else I needed to say. There's a myth we're taught, I said slowly, that forgiveness means access, that because someone is family, they're entitled to a place in your life, no matter the damage. The room quieted again. Forgiveness, I said, can be private. Healing can be silent. And boundaries are not cruelty, they are survival. I looked directly at my parents then, not with anger, with clarity, the kind that comes only after years of rebuilding yourself piece by piece. The girl in this story didn't survive so she could return to the people who broke her. She survived so she could choose herself. I stepped back from the podium as the applause erupted again, louder, longer, standing. The announcer returned to the stage. The ceremony moved on. But I couldn't stop shaking. Backstage, my hands were cold. My heart raced like I'd just run for my life all over again. Evelyn was waiting for me, eyes shining with pride and worry. "You did great," she said softly. I nodded, but I wasn't listening, because down the aisle, through the side entrance reserved for speakers, I saw my mother standing there, alone, waiting. I stopped walking. For a second, I considered turning around, pretending I hadn't seen her, slipping out a different exit, protecting the fragile calm I'd built for myself. 13 years of silence had taught me avoidance was easier than confrontation. But my feet didn't move. My mother stood near the wall, twisting her hands together the way she used to when she was nervous. Up close, she looked smaller, older. The authority she once carried had eroded into something uncertain, almost fragile. She whispered my name. Hearing it from her mouth felt like reopening a wound that had finally scarred over. "I didn't know," she said immediately, as if the words had been rehearsed for years. "I swear I didn't know." I didn't answer. She continued, voice shaking. "Your father said, your sister said you were being dramatic, that you'd come back when you calmed down." I searched her face for something. Regret, accountability, truth. All I saw was fear. Fear of what this moment meant. Fear of what she had lost. "I was in the hospital," I said calmly. My voice surprised me. It didn't crack. "I almost died." She flinched as if struck. "I would have come," she said quickly. "If I'd known, I would have come." I nodded once. "But you didn't ask." Silence stretched between us. People passed in the hallway, laughing, celebrating, unaware they were walking through the ruins of my childhood. My mother reached out, then stopped herself, her hand hovering in the air. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "I had no idea you were this." This. The word landed wrong. "I didn't do this to impress you." Not harsh, just honest. I did it because I had to survive. Her eyes filled again. "We made a mistake." I took a breath. This was the moment I had imagined so many times. Her apology, her admission, her regret. But it was incomplete. "You didn't make a mistake," I said gently. "You made a choice." She shook her head. "We were misled. Your sister." I raised my hand, stopping her. "No," I said. "This isn't about her. It's about you believing I was disposable." The word hung between us, heavy and undeniable. "I was 15, I was sick, I was scared, and you let me walk into a storm." She covered her mouth, sobbing now. "I thought if I stayed quiet, things would calm down." I nodded slowly. "They did, for you." That was the truth she hadn't been ready to face. My father appeared at the end of the hallway then. He didn't come closer, he just stood there, watching. The man who had shouted me out of his house now couldn't find the words to step forward. I looked at him briefly. He looked away. That was all I needed to know. "I don't hate you," I said to my mother, "but I'm not your daughter in the way you remember anymore." Her face crumpled. "Can we talk? Can we fix this?" Fix. Another word that assumed too much. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "There's something to accept." She looked at me confused. "That my life is full and you're not part of it." The words were quiet, but final. I stepped past her and walked toward Evelyn. She didn't ask what was said. She just wrapped an arm around me, grounding me in the present. Behind us, I heard my sister's voice. "Wait." I turned. She stood a few steps back, her graduation gown still on, cap tilted slightly askew. Her face was pale, eyes glossy with panic. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said quickly. "I was a kid too." I studied her. She wasn't lying, not entirely, but she wasn't telling the whole truth either. "You watched. You let it happen." She shook her head. "I didn't know you'd get hurt. I just wanted them to stop worrying about you. I was tired of everything being about your health." There it was. Honesty, finally. I paid for that lie with my body, and with 13 years of silence. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing she could say that would bridge that gap. "I forgive you," I said, and meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. Her shoulders sagged. "I hope you graduate. I hope you have a good life." Then I turned away. Walking out of that building felt like stepping into clean air after being underwater for too long. Outside, families were taking photos, hugging, celebrating new beginnings. Evelyn squeezed my hand. "You okay?" she asked. "I am." And I realized it was true. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat alone with the quiet. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind something unexpected. Peace. But peace has a way of being tested, because 2 weeks later, my inbox filled with emails I hadn't expected. From relatives I barely remembered, from family friends, from people who had only heard one version of the story. They all said the same thing. They're your parents. They didn't know. You only get one family. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. The storm wasn't over yet. The emails came in waves. At first, they were careful, polite, almost apologetic. "We heard what happened. Your parents are devastated. Families make mistakes." Then they sharpened. "You embarrassed them publicly. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. Your father's health isn't good. You should think about that." I read them all, every word, not because I owed anyone my attention, but because I needed to understand something that had haunted me since I was 15. Why people always rush to protect the comfort of adults over the safety of children. I closed my laptop and sat back, the familiar tightness returning to my chest. Evelyn noticed immediately. "You don't have to answer them," she said. "I know," I replied, "but I think I need to. Not to explain, not to justify, but to decide once and for all who I was willing to be pulled back into the storm by." I drafted one response, short, clear, sent it to everyone who had written. "I am at peace. Please respect my boundaries." Nothing more. The silence that followed was not immediate. It never is. People don't like boundaries when they interfere with the story they prefer. A week later, my father called. I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Then he called again. I answered on the third try, not because I was ready, but because I was tired of running from a voice that no longer had power over me. "You watched your speech," he said, without greeting. There was no apology in his tone, no warmth, just gravity. "Then you know the truth," I replied. A pause. "You made us look cruel." I almost laughed. Almost. "I told my story," I said. "If it sounds cruel, maybe listen to why." Another pause, longer this time. "Your sister didn't mean for—" I cut him off. "This conversation isn't about her." Silence again. I imagined him gripping the phone, jaw clenched, the same way he used to before shouting. "You left," he said finally. "You could have come back." I closed my eyes. I was unconscious in a hospital bed, and even if I hadn't been, you locked the door. That truth landed hard. I could hear it in his breathing. "What do you want from us?" he asked. The question revealed everything. He didn't ask what I needed. He asked what would make this go away. "I want nothing," I said calmly. "That's the point." He exhaled sharply. "You're holding a grudge." "No," I replied. "I'm holding a boundary." He scoffed. "Same thing." "It's not," I said. "A grudge is about anger. This is about safety." He didn't respond. "Please don't contact me again. If you want to support something, donate to the scholarship. If not, this is where we end." The line went dead. I expected to feel shaken or sad or hollow. Instead, I felt taller. That summer, the Second Chances Scholarship Program doubled in size. Applications poured in from students with stories that mirrored mine in ways that took my breath away. Kids kicked out for being sick, queer, poor, inconvenient. Kids who had learned too early that love can be conditional. I read every application personally. One night, I came across a letter from a 16-year-old girl who wrote, "My parents say I'm lying about my illness. I sleep in my friend's car now. I don't know how to keep going." My hands shook as I read it. I wrote back immediately, "You are not lying. You are not broken. And you are not alone." Helping others didn't erase the past, but it reframed it. My survival wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was a responsibility. At our annual scholarship dinner, I told Evelyn something I'd never said out loud. I said, "If you hadn't stopped, I wouldn't be here." She smiled, soft and sad. She said, "You would have found another way." But we both knew the truth. Some chances only come once. A month later, I received a handwritten letter, no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother. She wrote about regret, about fear, about wishing she had been braver. She didn't ask to meet. She didn't ask to be forgiven. She ended with one line, "I hope one day you can remember me kindly." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not to dwell on it, but to acknowledge it. Compassion didn't require reconnection. Empathy didn't require reopening doors that nearly crushed me. The night before the next graduation ceremony, another keynote, another audience, I stood alone on a balcony, city lights stretching out below me. I thought about the 15-year-old in the storm, the stranger who stopped, the family I chose, the family I released. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. But freedom has consequences, because the morning of the ceremony, my assistant knocked on my hotel door, face pale. "There's a situation," she said. "Your sister is here." I didn't answer right away. My assistant stood in the doorway, waiting, the hallway noise muffled behind her. In that pause, my mind raced through every version of this moment, every imagined confrontation, every rehearsed speech I had never needed. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That you were unavailable," she said. "She said she'd wait." Of course she would. "I'll talk to her," I said finally, not because I owed her anything, but because avoidance no longer served me. We met in a small conference room off the main hall, neutral, public enough to feel safe, private enough to be honest. My sister stood when I entered. She looked different without the graduation gown, smaller, uncertain. The confidence she once wore so easily had cracked. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said quickly. I sat across from her. "Say what you came to say." She swallowed. "I didn't know how to live with it anymore." "With what?" I asked. "The lie," she said, "and what it did to you." I waited. "For years," she continued, "I told myself it wasn't my fault, that Mom and Dad made their own choices, that you would have been fine if you'd just come back." Her voice broke. "But then I saw you on that stage, and I realized you didn't survive because of us. You survived despite us." That was the closest thing to accountability I had ever heard from her. "I'm not here to fix things," she said quickly. "I know I can't. I needed you to hear me say this." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a donation check, a large one. "To the scholarship," she said. "No name attached, no announcement." I studied her face, searching for expectation. I found none, only fear and something that looked like relief. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I'm finally old enough to understand what 15 actually means," she replied, "and because I don't want to become the kind of person who benefits from your silence." I leaned back, absorbing that. "You know this doesn't change our relationship," I said. She nodded. "I know." "And that we won't be close," I added. "I know," she repeated. "This isn't about closeness, it's about responsibility." We sat there for a moment, two adults bound by a childhood that had shaped us in opposite ways. "I accept this," I said finally, tapping the envelope. "For the scholars." Her shoulders dropped, like she'd been holding them up for years. "Thank you," she whispered. I stood. "Take care of yourself." She looked up, startled. "That's it?" "That's it," I said. "Some things don't need more words." She left without argument. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel hollow. I felt complete. Later that day, standing behind the curtain as the ceremony began, I reflected on something Evelyn once told me. Closure isn't a moment, it's a practice. I walked on stage with a steadiness I'd never felt before, not because my past had been redeemed, but because it no longer owned me. This time, when I spoke about the 15-year-old in the storm, I didn't feel her pain in my chest. I felt her strength. I spoke about boundaries without apology, about chosen family, about the courage it takes to walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. The applause was long and genuine. Afterward, students lined up to talk. One boy said quietly, "My parents kicked me out last year. Hearing you, it helped." I squeezed his shoulder. "You're going to be okay," I said. And for the first time, I believed it completely. That evening, I called Evelyn. "I think I'm done running," I told her. She laughed softly. "You stopped running a long time ago. You just finally noticed." As I hung up, I realized something important. My story had never been about betrayal. It had been about choice. And now, standing firmly on the life I had built, I was ready to tell the final part, not as a survivor looking back in pain, but as a woman who had reclaimed her future. The email arrived at 2:14 a.m. No subject line, no greeting, just 4 words in the preview that made my stomach drop. Your father collapsed. I sat up in bed instantly, heart racing, the glow of my phone cutting through the darkness. For a moment, I didn't open it. I just stared, aware that whatever waited on the other side would demand something from me. I had built my life carefully, deliberately, with boundaries that had taken years to learn and protect. And now the past was knocking again, this time dressed as an emergency. The message was from a family friend, someone who had watched me grow up, who had stayed silent when I was thrown out, and who now wrote as if proximity to crisis erased history. "He's in the hospital. Your mother is asking for you. She keeps saying this might be her last chance to make things right." I set the phone down. This was the moment everyone warned me about, the moment where boundaries are tested by guilt, where clarity is challenged by fear. Evelyn once told me, "The hardest boundary to keep is the one people try to cross with emergencies." I didn't sleep. By morning, the story had already reached me from 3 different directions: messages, missed calls, voicemails heavy with implication. He's still your father. You don't want to regret this. What if something happens? I dressed slowly, deliberately, as if moving too fast would mean agreeing to something I hadn't chosen yet. At the hospital, the air smelled the same as it had 13 years ago: antiseptic and fear. The familiarity made my chest tighten. I stood at the entrance for a long moment, grounding myself. I wasn't 15 anymore. I wasn't bleeding. I wasn't powerless. I walked in because I chose to. My mother was in the waiting room when I arrived. She looked up and froze. For a second, we just stared at each other, 2 women shaped by the same night, standing on opposite sides of its consequences. "You came," she whispered. "I came to listen," I said carefully, "not to fix." She nodded quickly, as if afraid I'd disappear if she moved too slowly. She told me what happened. Stress, a warning sign, the doctor said. Not over yet, uncertain. "He keeps asking for you," she said. "He says he needs to talk to you." There it was, the ask. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them. "What does he want to say?" She hesitated. "I don't know. He just keeps repeating your name." I considered the door down the hall. 1 conversation, 1 room, 1 man who had once decided I was expendable. 5 minutes, I said. That's all. Inside the room, the machines hummed quietly. My father looked smaller than I remembered, weaker. His skin was pale, his eyes tired. When he saw me, his breath caught. "You came," he said. "I said I would," I replied, standing near the door. He stared at me, searching my face like he might find the child he remembered. He didn't. "I was wrong," he said suddenly. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. "About that night, about you." I waited. I let my anger decide for me, and I told myself it was discipline or truth or what was best. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "And when I didn't come back?" He looked away. "I told myself you chose that." There it was, the lie that made it possible for him to live with himself. "I almost died," I said quietly. He flinched. "I know." "No," I replied. "You know now. You didn't then, and you didn't want to." His eyes filled with tears. "I can't undo it." "I know." He reached for my hand. I stepped back. This was the line. "I'm not here to absolve you, and I'm not here to punish you." "Then why are you here?" he asked. I took a breath. "Because I needed to see whether you understood." "And?" he asked desperately. "I see that you regret the outcome. I don't see that you understand the choice." His face crumpled. "I was a child, and you had power. That's the difference you've never named." Silence filled the room. "I don't want reconciliation," I said gently. "I want truth, and this is as far as it goes." He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his temples. "I'm proud of you." I met his eyes. "That's not something I need from you anymore." I left before he could say anything else. In the hallway, my mother was waiting. She searched my face, hoping for something, anything that looked like return. "He's asking if you'll come back tomorrow," she said. I shook my head. "No." Her shoulders sagged. "So this is it?" "This has been it for a long time. I just finally said it out loud." I walked out of the hospital into the sunlight, my heart racing, not from fear, but from release. I had faced the storm again, and it didn't take me this time. But as my phone buzzed with a new message from a journalist who had heard whispers of my story and wanted an interview, I realized something else. My truth wasn't finished making waves, and the final choice, how I would close this chapter, publicly and permanently, was still ahead of me. I agreed to the interview 1 week later, not because I wanted attention, not because I wanted sympathy, but because silence had protected everyone except the child I used to be. The journalist met me in a quiet studio, all glass walls and soft lighting. Before we started, she asked gently, "Is there anything you don't want to talk about?" I thought about the storm, the hospital, the locked door. "No," I said, "only things I won't soften." When the camera light turned on, I didn't tell the story dramatically, I told it accurately. I spoke about being 15 and sick, about being believed by no one, about being thrown out for not what I'd done, but for being inconvenient. I spoke about the car, the hospital, and the woman who stopped when she didn't have to. I spoke about Evelyn. She didn't save me, I said. She reminded me I was worth saving. The clip went live 3 days later. I didn't read the comments at first. I'd learned that not every voice deserved access to my nervous system. But the emails came anyway, from parents who said the story changed how they listened to their kids, from students who said they finally had words for their pain, from strangers who said, "I thought it was just me." That's when it fully landed. This story wasn't about my parents anymore. It wasn't even about my sister. It was about a system that protects authority over truth and what happens when someone survives it anyway. I never returned to the hospital. My father recovered slowly. I heard that through others. I didn't send a card. I didn't send a message. Not out of cruelty, but out of alignment. Boundaries are not punishment. They are clarity in action. On the anniversary of the night I was hit by the car, I visited Evelyn. We sat on her balcony, the same place where years earlier I had first felt safe enough to sleep without listening for footsteps. "I used to think forgiveness meant letting them back in," I said. "And now?" she asked. "Now I know forgiveness meant letting myself move forward without dragging them with me." She smiled. "That's a hard-earned lesson." The Second Chances Scholarship Program expanded again that year. We added emergency housing support, medical advocacy, legal referrals, things I wish had existed when I was 15. At the opening ceremony, I looked out at the students, some confident, some terrified, all standing on the edge of something new. I told them this: family is not defined by blood, it's defined by behavior. And love that requires you to disappear is not love, it's control. I paused, letting it settle. You are allowed to leave places that harm you. You are allowed to succeed without apologizing. And you are allowed to build a life so full that the people who abandoned you no longer get to narrate it. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been older than 16. "My parents say I'm ungrateful," she whispered, "that I owe them everything." I met her eyes. "You owe yourself a future," I said. "That's the only debt that matters." That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the drawer where I kept my mother's letter. I reread the last line one more time. "I hope one day you can remember me kindly." I folded it back and placed it beside something else, a photo of me and Evelyn, taken the day I defended my dissertation. We were both laughing, unguarded. Kindness, I realized, doesn't always look like closeness. Sometimes it looks like distance held without hatred. Sometimes it looks like telling the truth and walking away. 13 years ago, I was a 15-year-old girl pushed into a storm and told I wasn't wanted. Today, I am a woman who knows exactly who she is, what she survived, and what she will never tolerate again. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about reclamation. And if you're listening to this wondering whether it's too late to choose yourself, it isn't. It never was.